Hi everyone, in this video we will discuss how you should describe your internship experiences in your CV for maximum impact in your interviews. So imagine you have this whole string of internships, top law firm 1, top law firm 2, the best kinds of law firms, and your CV is well adorned by internships at the best places possible. I have seen countless students who can boast of such wonderful CVs. But they seem to have one problem, which is how should they explain all this experience? How should they crystallize it in an interview for maximum impact? How can they use this vast experience to distinguish themselves in an interview? So here I'm going to try and give you some pointers on how to use these experiences. There are two levels in which you should understand this. One, if you're in your early years at law school and you want to plan out your internships, in that case, you will want to plan your internships and do the work in the internship in a certain way after you hear this video. For most people who have already done their internships, they've already completed them, for them the challenge really is that how do they explain what they've done? And a lot of times what they've done appears to be very mundane. You might have a student who had the experience of making 100 or so tables when their law firm was doing a due diligence, and they don't remember anything else about it. And instead of writing that, they would obviously prefer writing about, researched on M&A issues or researched on the takeover code. Let's understand what are the repercussions of such a strategy. Now, if what you've really done is made tables because your law firm was undertaking a due diligence and taking part in the commercial transaction, but you were not in any way involved in the later stages of the transaction, how do you use this to your advantage? If you just write researched on company law issues, researched on stamp duty, researched on some other aspect of contract act, then your CV appears very generic. It does not plant any clues for an interviewer to ask you questions on. And really speaking, in an interview, the function of your CV is to give the interviewer ideas about what questions can he ask you. If you intelligently plan your CV in that way, and if you intelligently write what you did in your internships in that way, what you will realize is that you don't even have to plan your interview because of the clues that you've planted in your CV. Each interview will take a certain direction which you could have foreseen. There will be one of many permutations that were possible, and you will realize that these are the ones that are really materializing, which means you will be able to, in a way, predict some of the more technical aspects of your interview with ease. And for most people, this is a huge challenge because they really don't know how much law to prepare. What should they know about the work that they did, right? So before going to the next step, I want to explain another aspect, which is how do you plant these clues? For this, you will have to think about it in a different way. So imagine you worked on a due diligence. Instead of saying that you reviewed 100 agreements and made a table of them, can you think of saying, I worked on acquiring a company which owned telecom towers, and this was an acquisition of so and so type, and we were required to identify all the properties that they owned or had leased out on and conduct some kind of diligence whether their rights to that property were clear. In this process, of course, I ended up making several charts explaining the terms of these documents. Now, this is the explanation, and what you will do in your CV is just write work on a due diligence transaction where an acquisition of a tower company was involved. Something like that. Now, this is very crisp and plants enough clues for an interviewer to ask you questions on. Another way could be, I saw this recent entry somewhere in a CV that researched on how the New Companies Act applies to private companies. Now, this is a very pointed issue. Even if the answer is long, it's not generic. In your CV, the attempt should be not to have generic statements or phrases. It should be specific as far as possible. Now, what do you do if you don't remember exactly what the work was? Because as we already discussed, you ended up making the tables. At that time, you did not know this. You did not know how you would be using this in an interview in future. And you just thought that that work was not really relevant from a career perspective for you. So how would you use that experience now? So imagine that you have a generic CV, right? You worked on securities laws, you worked on Companies Act issues, you worked on transfer of property. So in that case, the strategy is that you lead the interviewer and you start talking about the issues that you understand well. For example, if you have written somewhere in your CV that worked on company law issues, right? So you can actually find out what are the three most pressing issues that are being discussed today under Companies Act. Say it could be private placements or it could be some interface between foreign investment laws and the company law. So as long as there are three relevant issues, the recruiter will appreciate it. Also, most recruiters are not too interested in knowing about exactly what kind of work you did in a particular internship. What they want to know is, will you be good for the job you will be hired for? Do you understand the law? Are you able to understand issues from a client's perspective? Or do you have reasonable legal analysis skills? Which is why if you even if you have written generic content in your CV, you can to work on it now, and you will have enough points to speak about with respect to technical subjects. For example, it could be securities law, it could be takeover code, it could be M&A. What you will need to do is identify 5 or 6 key heads which could demonstrate to an interviewer that you know this area of law. So if you are going for a corporate law firm interview, you should identify 5 or 6 entries in your CV which relate to corporate law. Similarly, if you are going for an IT law firm interview, then you should identify areas pertaining to intellectual property which you can connect in your CV. And then you can build on that. So this kind of preparation needs to be done in advance.